Thank you again for bringing us together here. And we pray that perhaps those that maybe are stuck in traffic will just get there safely and give them patience. We ask for your Holy Spirit to now reveal yourself to us. And just in looking at these different methods of faith and these different religions, Father, help us to see how the enemy seeks to distract people and deceive people. And Father, help us to use this understanding as a way of reaching people and understanding where people are coming from, just so that we can more effectively be used by you to share the gospel. So Father, quicken us now. Help us to be alert, attentive, as we learn these things. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So tonight, Eastern Religions 2. Last week was very important because it's so when you see what we're going to do tonight, understanding the concept of the Eastern mind and Hinduism is in one way sort of the grandfather of all these Eastern religions. Some, as we're going to see in some of the Chinese religions, were sort of a fusion of Hinduism and Buddhism and other things, but it's also understanding the Eastern mind and having a completely different concept of not only who God is, but what God is. And it's a very different method of looking at reality. So the first one that we're going to be studying tonight is Buddhism. Most people affiliate Buddhism with China. In reality, it's I won't say very few. Chinese people often call themselves Buddhists, but they're not really true Buddhists. Very often, the Western influence in China has caused them to feel the necessity to affiliate with some religion. Because in the West, almost everybody affiliates with some religion. So as the Western influence has gotten into China, they just sort of default and say, Buddhist.
Vietnam, I think, is a lot of Buddhists in Vietnam.
Yeah, Vietnam, a lot of Buddhists. Southeast Asia is big. Cambodia, Tibet is huge in Buddhism. It originated in India, but in reality, there's very, very few Buddhists left in India. But very, very big in Thailand, in Vietnam, Cambodia, that whole Southeast Asia corner down there is very big. So, it was fine. Bear with me a moment.
That's okay.
Deal with.
So where does Taoism come into play?
Well, we're going to talk about Taoism tonight. Taoism is Chinese. That's Chinese. That is very uniquely Chinese. Okay, sorry. All right. But Taoism is actually, you're going to see, hey,
Careful. Got some donuts over there if you want some.
I was just going to say, because there's a big backup on I-75.
Oh, is it?
But I'm like, you guys don't get to claim that one.
Did you guys go that way? Does he come that way? No, he was getting my mother a car. To time to sign the paperwork, so sorry to interrupt. Don't mind us.
Well, we're actually just getting started. We had a
What's
little
happening on
technical malfunction, so we're going to jump right in. Buddhism, back to Taoism for a second. You're going to find that actually Taoism, or Taoism, depending on if you're not supposed to, ended up being something that was very strongly influenced by Zen Buddhism. And we'll see that in a minute. So that's why I say Hinduism is sort of the grandpappy. You know, it started with Hinduism. And this is where it started, about 563, 480 to 483 BC, somewhere in that area. So somewhere like around the captivity of the Jews, just to give it a perspective.
So they're saying that Siddhartha Gautama,
Siddhartha Gautama.
so he was the first Buddha?
He was the Buddha, yeah. There have been other Buddhas, but he was the original Buddha.
So the Dalai Lama is considered the 13th Buddha of...
The Dalai Lama, and we're going to talk about him too, he's the 14th reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama is a god king of Tibet.
So is there different Buddhas? Because he was like the Buddha of compassion.
Yeah, Buddha just means awakened one, or enlightened one. That's what Buddha means. This was the original Buddha, the original enlightened one that founded Buddhism, if you will, Siddhartha Gautama. Again, like around the time of the Babylonian captivity of the Jews is when he came around. Now, the story of Siddhartha Gautama is loosely historical, probably largely legendary, and folklore, that kind of thing. It's nothing that can be in any way documented. It's just what's been sort of passed down from generation to generation. He was basically a prince. He was born into a ruling clan in India, in northern India. And he, as the story goes, while his mother was pregnant with him, she had a vision that he would someday become a great priest. Well, the father wanted nothing to do with that. The mother ended up dying shortly after he was born. The father said, well, I'm going to make sure that he never becomes a priest. I am going to shelter him and protect him, and he gets to see nothing. And there were 4 things that the father determined that his son would never see. And that is old age, sickness, death, or priestly asceticism. You know, priests sort of giving up their life for prayer and for meditation and things like that. So his father wanted to protect him from those things, because if he never sees those things, he'll never feel the calling to become a priest. But while he was, let's say, a young man, he was 30 years old, he was married, he already had children, but he was feeling very sheltered and decided that, and again, this is sort of the story of it, the legend of it, that he would take a chariot ride. He wanted to see the world. He told his father, I want to go out, I want to escape the boundaries of our palace and see the world. And his father said, well, he's an adult now, I'm going to let him do it, but I'm going to go make sure that my guys go before him and we sweep the streets clean. Make sure there's no beggars, there's no old people, there's no diseased people, there's no death, no priests sitting by the side of the road, nothing. And as the story goes, as he went out, even though the father had done that some spirit had come along and had brought all 4 of these things in his path. So that he saw an old man, a sick man, a decaying corpse in a funeral procession, and a priest living an ascetic, meditative life. And he saw suffering, and he didn't understand it, because he had never suffered. He had never been in want. He had never, understood what suffering was until he saw it. And he realized there are people that are hurting, there are people that are suffering, and he decided he had to find a solution to man's suffering. So he went on a 6 or 7 year pilgrimage to discover them. Bearing in mind, he's Hindu. He's going to go to the Hindu priest, and he's going to seek the wisdom that Hinduism has to offer. He went into meditation, went into self-mortification, meaning he didn't eat. They said he would eat on one, you know, again, this is all very legendary, and he lived for years on 1 grain of rice a day. That was his punishing himself, you know, going without wearing any clothes, and just stripped himself of everything, and lived an ascetic life for 6 or 7 years.
One grain of rice a day?
Yeah, again, bear in mind, a lot of this is all very
Couldn't make it
legendary.
more than a couple of weeks.
Well, you know, the statue of Buddha, he's a very large individual.
Well, there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. Because when he got to the end of it, he realized, this is stupid. I'm no closer to understanding man's suffering than I was to begin with. So he stopped his fast, and he had a bowl of rice. And he...
Obviously more than one.
Yeah. And he sat under a Bodhi tree, that was called the Bodhi tree, which was a fig tree. And he suddenly experienced an awakening, or an enlightenment, that what he called the middle way, which is neither luxury, which is how he was brought up, nor self-deprivation, which is the way he was treating himself in the last 6 or 7 years. And he decided he didn't need to deprive himself, that he could eat as much as he wants. It doesn't, you know, the fat Buddhas don't necessarily mean that he was fat. It just means that he shunned self-deprivation. Because some of the statues of Buddha he's not, but a lot of them he is, because the idea is that he determined now that he didn't have to deprive himself, and by the statues he didn't. So he discovered the middle way. The middle way, which is neither luxury nor self-deprivation, and he created what is called the Four Noble Truths, which are something that I'm not going to come up with here. This thing is I'm really having technical difficulties today. And it's crashing. Second, I'm going to get rid of this thing.
My back is really through this rest.
One more time.
You're comfortable.
So, Four Noble Truths. Okay? To live is to suffer. He determined that this life is just filled with suffering. Life is tough, existence is painful. Even death does not stop suffering, because he's Hindu, so he believes in reincarnation. He's just going to come back and suffer some more. He determined that suffering was caused by desire. This was the revelation. Suffering is caused by desire, lacking of something, greed, attachment to the impermanent, illusionary. Remember, Maya, everything is illusion. Everything we see and touches, the only thing that's real is Brahman. Right? So, again, he's still borrowing from his Hindu upbringing. Everything is an illusion and impermanent, and we're attached to these things, and that's what's causing our suffering. So, suffering will cease by eliminating all selfish desire. So once we learn to let go of everything, then we no longer desire, and so we don't have to suffer anymore. Desire is eliminated by following what he calls the Eightfold Path, which is right view, understanding the truth of existence, or what we're going to find out in a minute. The truths of non-existence, because he sort of takes the idea of Maya, that all we see here is illusion, to the degree where he begins to teach now, all we see and touch and feel and experience here doesn't actually exist. That we don't even actually exist. Our own existence is an illusion, and we only reach our full enlightenment when we realize that we don't really exist, and we are eventually just sort of snuffed out. That same idea in the Hindu religion of the drop of water being in the ocean, only now it's like there's not even an ocean. You just dissolve into nothingness, which is where you belong, which is where you'll have peace, even though you don't really have consciousness. So right view, understanding truths of the truths of existence, right intention, right speech, right action, you know, doing the right things, avoiding immorality, things like that. There's some ethics in there. Right livelihood, simple, honest lifestyle, you know, hard work. Right effort, directing your energy in the right direction. Right mindfulness, meditation, controlled thinking, and then right concentration. Continuous focus, form and content of meditation are crucial. Meditation is crucial in Buddhism, because it's all about controlling your mind, especially when you get into Zen Buddhism. Their sacred texts, okay, the Tripitaka, which is sort of a trilogy, if you will. It's called the Three Baskets. These were assembled and put together about 500 years after Gautama's death. And it's the Vinaya Pitaka, which is the basket of discipline. It's a code of ethics for the monks and nuns that practice Buddhism. The Sutra Pitaka, which is it's called Basket of Threads, which is accounts of the Buddhist teachings. These are supposedly, again, almost like the Quran. They just sort of, anybody who ever wrote anything down that Buddha said or anything that Buddha ever wrote down, they just sort of collected it. It's sort of a collection of these things. And then the Abhidharma Pitaka, the basket of scholasticism, which is just a philosophical works from Buddha. Just a couple of other historical figures, not that you know any of them, I don't, maybe you do, but I don't. Ashoka and Nagarjuna. The first one, he was an emperor who discovered Buddhism and decided to send it out. He sent missionaries out, he popularized it and spread it, although it never really took hold for very long in India. It very soon sort of spread out to surrounding areas, like I said, Tibet and Southeast Asia, and it really took on there, but it really kind of faded out in India. Nagarjuna is probably the most influential Buddhist besides the Buddha himself, the original Buddha. Key beliefs.
You want me to stand over there and punch a button?
It's not, it's the, for some reason the application is crashing.
It's not perfected yet.
So his awakening under the Buddha, under the Bodhi tree, caused him to sort of begin his teachings. After he realized this, he started spreading his teachings and his philosophies. The fundamental phrase, the principle that he was delivering was, all is suffering. Everything is suffering. That's why, you have to, if you exist, you suffer. So you strive toward non-existence. You strive to become one with the nothingness. Okay? He separated himself from Hinduism. He eliminated the caste system. He didn't believe in the caste system, and he rejected the Vedas. We talked about the Vedas last week as sort of the divine writings. In Hinduism, he rejected those as authoritative. But as in Hinduism, salvation or enlightenment depends on meditation, becoming a monk. Ultimately, at least in its initial stages, there was no salvation, there was no enlightenment for anybody but monks. You had to be reincarnated, be good, behave yourself, be as good a person as you can so that you can be elevated in the next life and eventually, hopefully, come back as a monk. And then once you come back as a monk, then you might be able to be an enlightened one.
You know what's interesting about all these religions is that if you think about it, there was only really one religion after the flood, and that was the worship of God. Mm-hmm. And then once mankind started, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, they were passing everything they learned down to their kids, and somehow all of this started because Job was Oriental, wasn't he?
Job,
who was Job? Job was wasn't he?
Well, Job was before the flood.
Job was before the flood?
Believe it or not. Most people believe that Job lived before the flood. That's why he talks about dinosaurs and things like that.
That's the oldest book, right?
That's what they say. It's probably the oldest book ever written.
But it's interesting that mankind after the flood had a knowledge of God and had a first-hand knowledge of what was happening passed on from Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and yet it got corrupted. And then
well, it's like almost every culture has a flood story. How is that? It's because of the dissemination of people. It's interesting that there are essentially 3 races. I know now there's 25 races these days. But I know when I was growing up, there was 3 races. It was basically white, black, and Asian. Negroid, Caucasoid, what was called Mongoloid. But that became a bad word. Disparaging word for certain people. So Shem, or the Shemites, which eventually became the Semites, basically that's, in one sense, that's like the Caucasoid race. Ham went to Africa, okay? And, and this is, people use this to promote racism, but Ham, part of his name means black, and he went to Africa. And Japheth went east. So that was where the population sort of spread, was out of the Middle East. Some went to the east. The Europeans, then, where we sort of more directly come out, it didn't come till later. But that was where society, civilization sort of grew from. And you'll see stories of the flood, and you'll also see in the essence of almost all religions, if you go back far enough, they believe in, number one, they believe in some kind of a God. And most of it starts with monotheism. If you go back far enough, and a lot of scholars will tell you that polytheism was first, that we naturally started with polytheism, and then we moved to monotheism. But the reality is, it's just the other way around. The oldest religion, if you go back far enough, it begins, and I'm just talking about archaeologically and anthropologically. Of course, we know in the scriptures we begin with monotheism, but yeah, the origins were there from the beginning. And even as we look into some of these Eastern religions and Chinese religions, a lot of them originated from a monotheistic mindset and not a pantheistic mindset. So, but yeah, it's interesting to see how they've sort of, where did some of this stuff come from. So,
And it's interesting that the Eastern religions, the Oriental Eastern religions are always a little kind of, they're, to me, they're kind of odd. They're off, you know what I mean? And it's interesting that even Jesus himself told the disciples, don't go to the East. Go spread the word, but don't go to the East. So, yeah, there's a part in that, I can't remember where it was, but he said don't bother going to the East. I'll have to look. I'll have to find it.
The thing about Eastern religions, again, that's why it's important for us to really study these ones, because they're so foreign to what we are accustomed to. It's such a foreign concept of reality. Because I know, I'm saying these things about non-existence, and it sounds, to us, it sounds nonsensical. Because we have a very linear mindset, a little more logical. And one of the things about Buddhism is logic is irrelevant. It has anything to do with logic, because logic is just man's invention, and again, it's Maya. It's illusion. Our whole thought process, concepts of anything that we can think of, philosophies, which is ironic because if all of that is illusion, then so is this philosophy. It's self-defeating. So, but that's just, it's a mindset that they grew up with, that they can really, for some reason, that makes sense to them. And it's an Eastern way of looking at things, and that's why the Eastern religions seem, odd or just very foreign to what we're accustomed to. This works, time, then we do it without slides, and you can just get the slides on the, right now, I don't think it's doing a lot of whirling and spinning.
Yeah. I had one temporary. I know you told me that.
All right. So, okay, salvation, again, is called nirvana, which means blown out like a candle, a flame that vanishes. Okay, it actually ends up more resembling atheistic annihilation. You basically cease to exist. It's very similar to Hinduism in that you become one with the universe, but it essentially means you cease to exist. And that's the ultimate reality. That's what you're seeking after. This state of non-existence is called sunya, the great void, which is empty of all things. And that's where we're supposed to be trying to head ourselves to. Gods are not important to enlightenment. As a matter of fact, because as he puts it, they're ignorant too, and they can actually hinder enlightenment. So he discouraged people from worshiping any gods, although you could. It basically is an atheistic worldview. Again, all existence is Maya, complete illusion. And remember, Atman was the soul. Well, here you have Anatman, the non-self. There is no true self. Salvation comes by recognizing your place of the non-self in the void.
Sounds like a whole bunch of nothing.
Yeah, it sounds like just weird circular reasoning and nonsensical talk, but They see nothing, see, because our concept of nothing is
I
nothing.
don't think you're.
That nothing means nothing. Nothing means there is this a lack of anything. To them, nothing is a type of existence.
So nothing is something to them.
Nothing is some kind of something,
You feel like you're.
but it's a something that is nothing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
They
that's
do
why we're here.
believe, they believe in karma, okay, all living things subject to the law of karma, principle of cause and effect, that kind of thing, reincarnation. They don't believe in a soul, they believe, but they do believe that emotions and feelings and impressions and things like that, moments are passed on, often called transmigration. Okay, like lighting, going from one candle to lighting another one. Again, Nirvana, no one escapes samsara by enlightenment at death and is blown out like a candle, entering the realization of one's non-existence. You have to sort of reach that point, and again, you have to be a Buddhist monk in order to get to that place of enlightenment.
No, I can't.
There are some moral precepts, okay, what he calls the 5 silas. They have to refrain from the taking of all life. This is again like that ahimsa, you know, doing no harm. You can't kill a fly, you can't kill a cockroach, you can't, you know, if you swallow a gnat when you're riding your bike, you're in big trouble. You just killed something.
Are plants exempt from that? I'm assuming they're vegetarians.
Yeah.
But yet plants are exempt from life.
Yeah, because it's not a, you know, in their mindset, it's not a life form. You know,
Doesn't have
of course, we
face.
know in the scientific sense it is a life form,
Yeah.
but it's not a living being to them. Abstain from stealing, immoral sexual behavior, all the monks are celibate, lying, taking of intoxicants, no alcohol, no drugs. Again, the goal of Buddhism, the immediate, is to eliminate the cause of suffering. By eliminating suffering, that's when you can become enlightened and aware of your own self-non-existence. Because the ultimate goal is reaching that place of non-existence. Twofold orientation toward existence, a negative attitude toward life. Existence is the problem. You know?
How can you possibly make yourself believe you're not existent? But they must be nuts, these guys.
I know, well, it could be because, yeah, it makes no sense because if I therefore reach the conclusion and understand that I don't exist, how can I have that thought? You know, at least Descartes, he understood that he existed because he said, I'm thinking about it. You know, Descartes, I think, therefore I am. He says, look, I don't know what exists and what doesn't exist. Everything could be illusion. He was sort of borrowing from the playbook there. He's saying, well, everything could be illusion. I don't know. I don't know if anybody else exists. So let me think about if I exist. Well, I'm not sure if I doubt it. I have doubt as to whether or not I exist. Well, if I have doubt, that's something. If doubting is something, then I must exist in order to doubt. So that's why he said, I think, therefore I am. Well, they say, I think, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. That doesn't mean that I am.
Do the Hindus
It's an
same
illusion.
thing?
Yeah, it's essentially,
When I worked with a Hindu, he used to say that everything was an illusion, a dream.
yeah, it's essentially the same thing, except that at least the Hindus don't believe in non-existence. They believe that all of this is illusion.
Yeah.
It's Maya, it's illusion, because the only true thing that exists, remember the monism we talked about last week, only one thing exists in the whole universe, Brahman. There's nothing else that exists in the universe but Brahman. And we are all a spark off of Brahman. Well, in Buddhism, there's only one thing that exists in all the universe, non-existence. And we are a piece of that non-existence, and we believe that we exist, but it's an illusion. We actually don't truly exist, and our goal is to get back into that pool of non-existence. So it's related to Hinduism, but they sort of tweaked it.
So we believe in nothing, but we hope it's something, but eventually we want to go back to nothing.
Yeah, that's the idea. We got to realize that it's nothing. So anyway, enlightenment, Buddha, no matter how conceived, provides a solution for the frustrations of life. That's the immediate goal, is to be free from the frustrations of life. Now, Buddhism can essentially, there are as many denominations and offshoots and schools of Buddhism as there are Christianity. I mean, there's a million schools of Buddhism, but they generally fall into two denominations, and then a third one is a sub-denomination of this one, but they tend to feel it's one unto itself because it's different enough. But it's a significant one we'll talk about. Theravada, the path of the elders, it's also called Hinayana, or the lesser vehicle. This is sort of original Buddhism. This is emphasizes concentration, meditation, insight, the meditation of the monks, the bhikkhus. Okay, only. It's why it's called the lesser vehicle, because only monks can really practice it. Everybody else, you can be a Buddhist, but don't worry about doing any of this stuff. Don't worry about meditating or searching for enlightenment until you become a monk. And you can only become a monk by coming back as a monk in a reincarnated state. If you're not a monk in this life, just try to be a good person so that you can, in the next life, come back as a monk, and then you might be able to reach enlightenment. So it's called the lesser vehicle, or the smaller raft.
So are babies just born and they say, okay, this one's a monk?
It,
Do they actually go into it, like, hey, I was reincarnated, I'm here?
well, they'll find out as they grow if they feel called to
Full
be,
screen,
a priest or a monk, and they decide to follow that path in life. But if you haven't followed that path in life, then, you might as well just hang out and, try to get to the next life. That's Theravada. That is the predominant sort of old school Buddhism. Then there was called Mahayana, which is the greater vehicle, which says, no, look, the Buddha nature can be attained by all persons. We can all find enlightenment through meditation and the aid of what's called bodhisattvas, which is, bodhisattvas, which are, somebody can, in between reincarnations, if they are in the process of being enlightened, and in between a reincarnation, they can exist for a while in heaven and be getting more enlightened, and they can come down and visit people and help people on their path to enlightenment. And that's what this Mahayana believes, that the everyday person, if they're willing to spend time in meditation and in concentration and dedication and things like that, that the bodhisattvas can come down and visit them and help them on their path. Vajrayana is what's called the diamond vehicle. This is popularized by the Dalai Lama. It is Mahayana Buddhism, but mixed with some occultic stuff, what's called Bon religion, and Indian Tantra. It's got some occultic stuff in it. Promotes the worship of dark spirits. Shingon Buddhism in Japan is derived from Vajrayana. Now, that brings us to the Dalai Lama. His name is Tenzin Gyatso. He's born a monk in Tibet, and he is what's called the 14th Dalai Lama, the 14th reincarnation, or the 13th reincarnation of the Dalai Lama, meaning ocean of wisdom.
We should constantly say that here.
Okay, this is him, probably about, because he came, the way it happens is the Dalai Lama dies, and then they start looking for the new Dalai Lama. Who's going to be the new Dalai Lama? And they have some kind of process where they try to figure it all out.
There's a bunch of signs, and usually
Yeah, they look for signs and,
Yeah.
and whatnot. And apparently, at about the age of 5, they determined that he would be the Dalai Lama. And that's when, once they determine it, he is the Dalai Lama at that point.
a lot of it
At
has
the
to
age
do
of
with the
5.
fact that when the other Dalai Lama dies, his stuff that he had, that if the new child recognizes some of the stuff
Yeah.
that he has, it's, that he
So it's showing
Yeah.
preordained knowledge or prior knowledge or whatever?
Yeah, it's some kind of it gets passed over to
So they
them.
believe in a literal reincarnation.
Yeah, well, and again, they don't believe that the soul gets passed over, but that memories and feelings and things like that can get passed over. That the essence or the anatman, the non-self, can be transferred over, what they call transmigration. And obviously, he has to have been born after the old one died, and then.
Now, he's considered a god, isn't he?
Yeah, he is considered, this is where it gets confusing, because Tibet, he is the leader of Tibet, but he has been in exile since, I think, 1965 or something like that. When did he go into exile? 1959, he fled Tibet because of conflict with the ruling Chinese. Tibet is part of China. It's run by China, but they sort of let them do their own thing. So he is, to the Tibetans, he is the ruler of Tibet. He is the God king, if you will. They believe that he is deity, and that but he also runs the government, if you will. What government there is, and what government that the Chinese allow them to have, that he basically runs it. And that's why he's such a public figure. And this particular Dalai Lama has really sort of embraced the idea of publicity and making people aware of his brand of Buddhism. So he's popularized Tibetan Buddhism, more than anybody.
Don't a lot of people want to meet this guy, just like
Yeah,
they don't want to
everyone wants to
go
climb to
meet
the mountain, meet the Dalai Lama. He's the ocean of wisdom, the ocean of knowledge. So
But
everybody
Donna
wants to
studied
meet him.
under him.
Hmm?
Donna,
Tommy's
Tommy's
aunt.
aunt studied with the Dalai Lama.
She did what?
She studied.
Oh, studied under him?
Yeah, and they gave her a name, which is like, I don't know, the goddess of love or something. Yeah.
He once told Christianity Today that Jesus Christ also lived previous lives.
Well,
That Jesus reached a higher state either as a bodhisattva or as an enlightened person through Buddhist practice or something like that. That basically Jesus was a Buddhist. What few people realize is that the Dalai Lama religion is very occultic. It's very steeped in the Tantrism, Tibetan Buddhism, ritual use of human remains and bodily excretions, spirit possessed oracles, and really occultic kind of stuff that most people don't realize, that he's like speaking to demons and things like that. So,
Who's that?
hmm?
Who's that?
Dalai Lama.
Then-
Okay. I don't know why Zen got such a kind of thing up there, but Zen Buddhism is what a lot of people, particularly in the West, may be familiar with of Buddhism. It is one of the schools of Buddhism. Again, that falls under Mahayana Buddhism, the large raft, but it's a break off from that, and it's under some influence of some Chinese popular religions like Taoism. And we're going to see some of the similarities when we talk about Taoism tonight. Rejects theoretical knowledge, sacred writings, in favor of experiencing a sudden enlightenment, what they call satori, through intensive seated meditation. They meditate, they try to empty their mind. They sometimes use illogical anecdotes such as, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Because they're trying to distract themselves. The idea is that they don't want to think about enlightenment. They want enlightenment to hit them. It's almost like they compare it to like a joke. That if I tell a joke and I explain the joke, it's not funny. But if I just tell the joke, if you get it, and you laugh. And Zen Buddhism is like that. So they try to empty their mind. They think of silly things like this to distract them, to keep them from trying to receive this enlightenment, because they don't want to be, if they're seeking the enlightenment, then they won't receive it. It has to hit them spontaneously, sort of out of nowhere. And one of the things that they stress is, enlightenment is found spontaneously apart from words and explanations. So they practice silence. They don't want to talk. They try to remain completely silent, because words will just complicate their attempt for enlightenment. So that's why they'll sit and they try to completely empty their mind. That's what you hear them say. Trying to empty my mind of everything, so that in hopes that they'll be hit by this enlightenment.
It's called possession.
Yeah. And with Zen Buddhism, it's usually they're under the direct guidance of a Zen practitioner, like from master to disciple kind of thing. And that's how the knowledge is transmitted by sort of a prodigy. What's the other one? Mentor prodigy kind of thing. So that is Buddhism. And we can see where Buddhism sort of, you can see Vajrayana, which is the brown. Okay. You see in Tibet. Okay. The Theravada, again, Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, Burma. That's sort of the traditional Buddhism. Mahayana, the large raft, which ended up getting mixed with a lot of other things. Zen Buddhism, again, is a mixture of some of this Chinese with Buddhism. And then the Vajrayana, we see in Tibet and up in Mongolia. Where we see the Dalai Lama in Tibet and that area there. So just an idea of where you would see Buddhism. So, however, in China, they will often say that they're Buddhist when they're not really Buddhist. They just, they sort of, Buddhism is a popular religion that people understand and they're okay with it. They're not really, they don't feel that it's a strong dogmatic belief system that they have to have. So, but most of them will find themselves more affiliated with what's called Chinese popular religion. Okay? It's sort of a synthesis of separate elements, basically folk religion. It's stuff that grew up out of society, out of people coming up with things for needs, mixing things, mixing their traditional religion. One thing that is sort of traditional in Chinese religions, and they incorporate it into anything, whether they become Buddhist or Confucian or Taoism, is the veneration of the dead, the ancestor veneration, where they worship, in a sense, their ancestors, and this is why. We always talk about how the Chinese have such great reverence for their elderly. The reality is, the reason why is because they believe that if they don't treat their elderly well, after they die, they're going to come back and haunt them.
Wow.
So they treat their elderly with respect and with honor so that they won't come back and haunt them.
I thought this ancestor stuff was Japanese.
No, mostly again, this sort of carries out into Japan too. There's Buddhism, and there's I'm going to find that even Shinto has some Chinese overlap to it, but the veneration of ancestors is a real Chinese thing. That goes as far back as they can remember, and so they just incorporate it into everything.
That's great.
Two distinctive traits is, one is a close relationship between state and religion. Their religions end up being very practical. It has to do with society. How do we make things work? Because the other emphasis is on divination. They have, they want to find things out through you know, casting of lots and stuff like that, doing, you know, tea leaves, and that's why, you know, we see the remnants of it even in Chinese beliefs today, where they'll put certain things. Go to a Chinese restaurant. A lot of Chinese restaurants will have a little thing hanging over the door, and they just say, "Oh, it's for good luck." And basically that's what it is. It's so the spirits don't come and haunt them. You know, they're very superstitious. And that's why, I mean, you know, the fortune cookie is an American invention, but the idea of hiding a fortune in a pastry is something that came out of the Chinese popular religions. That you would, particularly for children, they would open up their dessert or their food, their candy or whatever, and they would get something that, when it was something you would tell people, like we would say, have a nice day, have a good day, safe drive, something like that. They would, you know, send well-wishing, that they wouldn't be haunted by spirits and things like that. You know, and that's what all the luck and everything that seems to be affiliated with Chinese religion goes back to this idea of spirits. So, but very close relationship between state and religion, because if you know anything about the history of China, China was essentially a collection of tribes. They used to beat each other up all the time. And all these dynasties you hear about, the Ming dynasty, and this dynasty, was one particular tribe seemed to beat everybody up pretty well, and they were the prominent tribe. And so it was their dynasty, you know, until one dynasty, which eventually became known as the Qin dynasty, managed to, at least for a time, unite all the tribes. And that's why the country was called the Chinese, or China, because it was the Qin dynasty, and the one thing that made them united. So.
Something's yin and yang. Isn't that?
We're going to get there. We're going to get to the yin and yang.
Doesn't that have an association with martial arts?
It does, but so all the religions do too.
Yeah.
You know, Zen Buddhism is
Yes.
related to martial arts,
Okay.
and all these things do.
That's where I was going.
So, how to get society to work was a real problem for them, because they had all these tribal fights and things going on all the time. So a lot of their religion had to do with, how do we make things work? How do we make society work? How do we get people to behave themselves? How do we find a way of ruling people? So it becomes very practical, you know, this relationship between state and religion. Emphasis is also placed on balance, the yin and the yang. You know, you've seen this.
Yes.
It is the yin and the yang, okay? It's not good and evil. It is, you know, we can see here what some of these things represent. Okay? Yang is hot, external. You know, yang is hot, yin is cold. Yang is external, yin is internal. Excess, deficient, dry, wet, heaven, earth. And it represents balance. The idea is you're looking for a balance between the two. It's not that yin is evil and yang is good. It's, if you're all yin, that's evil. If you're all yang, that's evil. What's good is balance in the middle. So their whole thing is always about finding the balance. And one of the things that happens, to show you what I mean by casting lots. Okay, here's the yin and the yang. And see these things here? These come from a method of casting lots, where they would take sticks. And so you would have, see, like this would represent 2 whole sticks and 1 broken stick. Okay? A whole stick represents yin. No, yang, I'm sorry.
What is it?
Yeah.
That you're taking pills.
That's yin and that's yang. So a whole stick is yang, a broken stick is yin. So this here would be mostly yang, somewhat yin, right? Which would represent, like, for example, because yang would be sky. So if it's mostly sky but a little earth, then you have wind. Okay? If it's mostly earth and a little sky, then you might have fire. So each of these things sort of represent certain things. Okay? But it's their way of, it's almost like the tea leaves. They do this stuff because it helps them to divine the future. It helps them to tell them what their, you know, like fortune telling, what the future is going to hold for them. And the idea is to never be, you know, here, all yang, no yin, all yin, no yang. Okay, this is off balance, these two. You know, that's why it's heaven and earth. It's too extreme. The idea is to find the balance in the midst. And this ends up sort of permeating all their belief systems. And what happens is, again, this attempt to find a way of ruling society broke into 4 schools. The 2 most important ones, the ones we're really going to look at today, are Confucianism and Taoism, or Taoism. These 2 were, you know, again, this was sort of the yin and the yang. And these 2 are an attempt for balance. Okay, the Moists were love, 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 love. Everything is love. It goes from a guy named Mozi, who preached that embracing the principle of all-pervasive universal love will restore the empire, and resulting in material prosperity. Society will succeed, we'll all be good if we all just learn to love one another. Okay? Well, the reaction to this is what's called the legalists, the Fajia, who say, no, we need rules. We need a strong leadership to enforce rules with harsh punishments for infractions. You know, so you can see the yin and the yang of that. It's 2 very opposite perspectives on looking at society, how to deal with things in society. So these, you know, while they were prominent philosophies, they didn't hang on long because you can't sustain either one of these for very long. So Confucianism and Taoism were attempts at trying to balance out these 2 things. So what we get into we'll start with Confucianism. Founder, his name was not Confucius. Confucius is the name that the Jesuit monks gave him when they came. They gave everything a Roman name. His name was Confuzi, and he lived around 551 to 479 BC. One of the most influential, you know, we always hear Confucius say, right? Confucius say this, wise saying. He was a political figure. He was, you know, not a huge, he was like a, you know, county clerk or something like that. He was like somewhat of a political figure, politician who got into some political intrigues. Doesn't really say what they were, other than, you know, who knows, somebody was trying to push somebody out. You know, we got enough political intrigues.
So
In today's politicals, you know.
He actually at the same time that Siddhartha Gautama lived.
Around the same time, yeah. Because, while Buddhism was growing, this is what was going on in China. Remember, Siddhartha was in India. So he gets kicked out and but then begins teaching people. Becomes sort of a sidewalk prophet, if you will, talking to people about his philosophies, his political ideologies, and he starts gaining followers, and returns back to government after itinerant preaching. His basic philosophy was what was called punctilious duty, right things done rightly. So he's trying to balance sort of the idea of you have to do something. You can't just have love, 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 love. It needs to be done right, but something has to be done. And so that's why his philosophy is considered a philosophy of wisdom, of wise sayings, of finding the right way to do things all the time. Some figures that came in after him that promoted it, Mengzi, or what Mencius, philosopher who emphasized striving for the common good. Again, it's all very sort of socially oriented, all of this stuff. Zhuangzi was another one who came, emphasized the evil of human nature and the need for ritual and authority. Again, you know, we need somebody to control us. We need, you know, we tend to stray and break the law, so we need to have some rules. And again, that's sort of the idea of Confucianism, is understanding the rules so we can make right decisions. Okay, sacred writings, if you want to call it that, there's 4 books of Confucian canon, the Analects of Confucius, again, just a compiling of his teachings. The Great Learning, again, attributed to Confucius and Zhangzi, one of his disciples, that we just talked about. The Doctrine of the Mean, the Book of Mencius, and one of the disciples we just talked about. Again, just people writing down their philosophies and their ideas of...
These religions, there's no God, it's all philosophy.
Right, well, he never speaks of a God. There's sort of an understanding that, yeah, there probably is a God up there, but it doesn't really matter. It's more about how you conduct yourself, and it is much more philosophical, you know, but like some of the other important writings, the Book of Filial Piety, you know, piety is basically godliness, but toward your brother, you know, toward your family, toward your relations. The idea of Confucianism is society, balanced society by right relations, having good relations. Now, one of the things he does, he talks about 5 relationships. You know, there's a relationship between father and son. Father should be loving, son should be pious. Elder brother, younger brother, gentle and humility. You know, husband should be good, wife should be obedient. Older friend, considerate, younger friend, differential. So he says, you know, relationships should work in a certain way. And if we learn how these relationships are supposed to work, then we'll have a balanced society. You know, again, respect for ages, you know, still clinging to the ancestral worship. And eventually, even Confucius is seen as a god because of ancestral veneration. He dies, and, well, we should worship him because he's one of our ancestors.
On the previous screen, wasn't the 5 classics, wasn't that like 1150 BC?
Yeah,
I might have, that might be 150 BC.
it says 1150.
I'll have to double check that.
1150, right?
Bottom, on the bottom, 1150.
Yeah, I know, I'm saying, but I think it should be
Oh,
150
Oh,
BC.
150.
Yeah, okay.
Because it's got to come after this. You know, the I Ching, yeah, the I Ching.
Yeah,
has to come after that.
it's 450 to
A system of divination. Again, still dealing in the spirits, and so it's while they're not identifying a god, they still believe in the spirits and the spirit world, whether it's ancestors or godlike spirits. You know, and like you said, Bob, not everybody considers it an actual religion, and Confucius did not speak of God or gods. But as you can see, many of his disciples are worshipped today in Confucian temples. He upheld the concept, the Chinese, he upheld the Chinese concept of heaven, but ultimately he was a humanist. His idea was about ethical behavior in government and interpersonal relationships. You know, his idea was the harmony of the perfected individual as a well-ordered society, within a well-ordered society. Ethical humanism is essentially what Confucianism is. He didn't speak of an afterlife or the soul, but condoned ancestor worship, but more as an ethical system of respect for the dead. So it's sort of a quasi-philosophy, political position, and a little bit of religion mixed in there too. Again, this emphasis on filial piety. Now, one of the things that he talks about as part of this societal adjustment is what he calls Ren Li. Now, Ren is an attitude of seeking the welfare of other people, but short of self-sacrifice. Now, what he has what he taught was what we call, he didn't call it this, the silver rule. The golden rule is do unto others what you would have them do unto you. Well, the silver rule is don't do to others what you wouldn't want them to do to you. It's the negative version. It's not necessarily virtuous. It's not do to people, it's not the positive aspect of doing the right things. It's, look, just don't do the wrong things. Even to the point of body posture and facial expressions, doing the right thing at the right time. And his whole point is that randomly leads to ideal human society. A societal utopia is what his ultimate goal is. Taoism that's the other one we talked about. Now, about 200 million worldwide, still today, very popular religion. And this one tends to be more religious. Began about the 6th century, about the same time as Confucianism. This man, Lao Tzu, or Lao Tzu, was a contemporary of Confucius. Again, trying to find the balance between love, 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 and lock them up. And he came up with the idea of the way. He's called the old man because it is assumed he was so wise that it is assumed that he was born at the age of 72. Came out with gray hair and speaking and everything. Okay? Again, this is, all this is very, very legendary kind of stuff.
Wow.
His famous quote is, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step."
Go into that, actually.
Well, we've heard that one before, right?
Really?
Apparently, he was teaching, he had followers, and he decided he wanted to go outside of China. And he wanted to explore outside the border of China. When he got to the border of China, there was a gatekeeper who said, look, if you want to leave China, that's fine, but you have to write down all your wisdom and leave it with me. So Lao Tzu sat down and wrote what's called the Tao Te Ching, which is it's called the Book of the Way and Its Power, is what Tao Te Ching means. So he wrote this, and he left it with the gatekeeper, and then there was another man that came by who read it, and then you have this guy is Zhang Zi, and he wrote a series of essays that popularized Taoism. Lao Tzu never really promoted Taoism, other than he taught for a while and then left this writing with the gatekeeper. But Zhang Zi is the one who really popularized it and promoted it and proselytized it and spread it about. It's basically polytheistic, multi-godism, worship of deities such as the Jade Emperor. Lao Tzu himself became venerated as a deity with many other of those that follow along in Taoism. With these folk religions, with these popular religions, it's not like things are, they don't have a systematic theology. All of them are the same way. They're, it's very varied widely from student to student, from school to school. Tao means the way. It's just what Tao means. It just means the way. And it's like going with the flow. Go the way. This is the way you should go, and just go with it. And his basic philosophy is do nothing. Just let things happen. Find that balance. The yin and the yang is very important. He feared going too far yin and too far yang, so he says we'll stay in the middle and we do nothing. It's called wu-wei, not doing. The idea is this: if I create a law, then I create a criminal. Because if I create a law, then when somebody breaks that law, they become a criminal. So I should not create a law, so I don't create the criminal. You know, again, this is the Western mind. This is just some bizarre logic, but this is just the philosophy that they're trying to find a way to make society work. So they, you know, his thing is go with the flow, smooth, the invisible power within all things. Salvation is very vague. It is not really any kind of enlightenment you're trying to get to. Some believe in reincarnation, others believe in life after death, ancestor worship. Left alone, this is the philosophy says, left alone, we will all return to the form of an uncarved piece of wood. I don't even know what that means, but that's the teaching. And that's our natural state, smooth and simple and, you know, doing nothing. Opposing values and judgments are only arbitrary standards. That's why nobody's right, nobody's wrong. That's why it's important not to try to do anything. Don't have any convictions, don't make any decisions. Just let things happen and just go with it. Learn to accept it. You know, the only valid response is no judgments at all. Laws create thieves, so don't do anything. You know, only he that rids himself forever of desire can see the secret essences. Sound familiar? It's, you know, it's like Zen Buddhism, the same idea. You want to be free and just do nothing. You know, combines elimination of desire with meditative techniques. It has, there are also occultic practices with it, spirit possession, mediums, divination, again doing the you know, the feng shui, that's all part of Taoism, the I Ching, and again with the divination of the throwing of the sticks. The martial arts is influenced a lot by Taoism and Buddhism. I mean, Kung Fu is a Buddhist thing. So most Chinese will affiliate themselves. A lot of them are atheists. To be perfectly honest, they really don't care. They don't, but they will sort of align themselves with either Confucianism or Taoism more than Buddhism. When you study the Chinese popular religions, it's just a hodgepodge of folklore and folk religion stuff that they practice that they may only do in their family, and it can vary from family to family. It's whatever they believe. That one of the key things is this veneration of the elders and veneration of the ancestors. Well,
Being the Chinese now, they're all communists, aren't they mainly atheists?
yeah, for the most part, they're atheists.
Yeah.
But they still, it's funny because I said when I took this, working on my master's, and I had to do a paper, and I chose Chinese popular religions. So I was studying them all, and I sat down, believe it or not, the only Chinese guy I know was the guy at the restaurant that I got my food. So, and he was, you know, it's funny because I got to know the guy because he was like teaching himself physics. He used to go down, he'd have a physics textbook and just sitting there. I'm like, are you taking classes? No, I just like reading it. You know, he used to teach himself these incredible things. So I created a relationship with him, and I asked him if I could talk to him. And he was basically an atheist. He's like, it's all a bunch of hooey-balooey. And I don't believe any of that stuff. And he sort of was Taoist and Confucian in that, he believed in, doing things rightly and wisdom and stuff like that. But he was telling me about the traditions. He was talking about his cousin, who he was in business with. And his cousin, so when he told me, he says, yeah, see that thing hanging over the door? He goes, I wouldn't put that up. He's about my cousin. He's superstitious. He wants to make sure that we're covered, So it depends. Even within the family, some of them adhere to some of the traditions and the old, the old school religions and superstitions and things. But more modern ones are kind of like, But you can even see that, of those four schools, the legalists, it's almost where China is today, where they've been. The strong, merciless ruler with harsh punishment, absolute rule over society to maintain order in society. That's their philosophy, is having absolute power and absolute rule in order to maintain an orderly society, to keep everything in order. That's what this guy, he said, it's brutal. When he grew up there, and he said, we lived out in the country, and they didn't bother us in the country. If you lived in the city, or you lived where there was a lot of people, the government was all over your back. They kind of let people alone in the country. He said, but then they started moving out to the country and bothering people in the country, and we had to get out, and that's when they came to the United States. He says, because the government was just brutal with control. And with like Christianity is, it can be sanctioned, it can be allowed. If you get a license, you can practice Christianity, but you can't proselytize, you can't try to win people over to Christ. You can have a church. The evangelical churches in China are house churches. They're secret, and they have to be baptized in bathtubs in secret and things like that.
Mhm.
And they have, they even, it's funny, I have a friend of mine that has been a missionary in China for probably like 30 years now. And she said that when they sing, they say the words, but they don't say it out loud. They sing and they whisper. They don't want the authorities busting in on them, find out that they're practicing their legal church. Jay, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, I was going to say that a few years ago, I remember that there was a tremendous story about the fact that they were actually going out into the country and raiding these houses and burning them down, literally where they were
Yeah, because they needed the land.
Yeah.
That's what this guy told me. He said they needed the land.
Yeah, they burned
So
the houses down and took the land.
that's the thing. And the government, doesn't matter how long your family's been living there, the government says we want it, the government takes it. That's it, and you're out. And they would go and they would just take the land. We're taking the land, you gotta get out, you gotta go live in the city now. And that's why they came to America. So, last thing we're gonna talk about, Shinto. Real quick, it's not a real, it's, again, there's a lot of details to some of these things, and I want everybody to just sort of be familiar with the general concept of some of these faith systems, some of these belief systems. Japan's native religion, again, most of Japan now is probably more atheist than anything else. There's some Buddhism there, but they're a very secular society, so predominantly I think would be atheist. But their religion of their culture is Shinto, which comes from the Chinese Shintao, the way of the gods. Okay? It's a mixture of pantheism, animism, polytheism. It's like a whole mixture of different faith systems. There's no founder. What had happened was there was an emperor, and he was trying to do something to prevent the influx of Buddhism that was coming into Japan. There was a lot of Buddhism was really beginning to influence Japan, and he didn't like the idea that this Indian religion was coming in and taking over in Japan. So he decided, he took one of his assistants, he says, look, find out what the ancient, deities are all about in Japan. He didn't even know. So he said, what's sort of the ancient traditions and the things that the Japanese have? So he researched it, and he found these native deities called the kamis, okay, who supposedly founded the island of Japan. Okay, and the kamis are basically the yin and the yang combined, merged with these spirits, and the spirits then emerged, because of yin and yang, emerged as male and female, and they began to procreate and create the kamis. And these kamis are these deities. And the deities these kamis come from some kind of a monotheistic, yet somewhat pantheistic, an impersonal God that exists. And the kamis came from that impersonal God. But they are the ones that founded the island of Japan. Okay, they had some sacred writings, Kojiki, and these are not, none of these are considered to be inspired scripture or spiritually authoritative. They're basically just stories about the kamis and how they founded Japan and where they came from, national epics, histories, historical works, and a treatise of Japanese political politics and history. So they're not like these spiritual ethical books on ethics and behaviors. They're more just history of Japan, legendary, folklore, history of Japan, and the founding of the deities of Japan. And key beliefs is basically that God is regarded as not as a personal creator, but as a force behind the kami spirits, the yin and yang intermixed, right? All of nature is animated, so they sort of mix with animism. They have like the sun goddess, they have, there's the spirits in the rocks and the streams. It's a combination of pantheism, polytheism, and actually animism as well. More than a dozen major kamis, including Amaterasu, who is the sun goddess, represented in Japan's the rising sun on their flag. It's the land of the rising sun. It's after this Amaterasu, one of the kamis that they worship, from whom the emperors of Japan descend. Supposedly they descend from the gods. That's why they worship as deity, the emperors. And some of them still do it today. Hirohito, Akihito, who's the emperor today, is more of a figurehead, although some people still believe him to be deity. Hirohito, who was the emperor during World War II, had to renounce the United States made him renounce his deity in order for, as part of the peace treaty. And it was basically, it was a way to get the people to stop fighting, because he had to renounce that he was a deity so they wouldn't keep fighting for their God's sake.
They wouldn't surrender unless they left Hirohito alone.
Yeah.
I don't know if they took his deity away.
Well, they had to make him, apparently
they wouldn't let him take it.
they made him renounce it. They didn't take him, right? But they made him renounce his deity so that he would not influence the people anymore. I mean, I don't know, the people immediately believed it, but it was just, I think it was, the Allies' way of getting some control in that area.
I think they made MacArthur the guide instead.
What's that?
They made MacArthur the guide instead.
Yeah, right, yeah. So the kami are, they're worshipped in shrines, the Shinto shrines, and each shrine is dedicated to a specific kami. And they will go, people go in there to pray to that particular god, just as you would for any other god, asking for help with difficulties and things like that. And again, because they're animists, they recognize the sacred places, mountains and streams and springs and historical locations sort of become holy places over there. They have what's called a Matsuri, which is festivals held in Japan throughout the year. And there's over 24 Shinto schools. Again, with these Eastern religions, they splinter off in a million different directions, and there's all these different schools based on teachers or kamis, whichever one they particularly follow. So about 85% of Japan's population embraces Shinto. Again, I think it's an identification thing, Shinto and Buddhism. I think it's more of an identification thing than it is a belief system. I highly doubt that most Japanese today worship kamis, but they identify themselves, just like, I identified myself as Catholic, and I really had no idea what the Catholic Church taught. You know, I was born, I don't know, I was born a Catholic. They told me I was Catholic.
I was Jewish.
You know, yeah, just like you guys, right?
Jewish, yeah.
You came out Jewish and you said, I guess I'm Jewish. I'm whatever it was when I, you know, but, so I think they identify themselves in that way, but they don't necessarily practice the worship of it. But the temples are still a very important part of their culture. And the one thing with the Eastern countries, you know, Japan and China in particular, is their culture is very ingrained in them. You know, they're purists. They really don't like, you know, they're very, I'm trying to get the word, It's basically they're like Claire, like you. It begins with an S. I know it begins with an S. Not solitary, but you know they're closed off.
Secluded.
What's that?
Secluded.
Secluded. It's not that either, but that's okay.
Secular?
But they don't like to intermingle in their culture. You know, and then when they come over here, they do because you know we're just the nature of the American culture is intermingling. But so. You know, they identify these temples, and you see these Shinto temples. You see the, you know, I was going to put one in here, but I forgot. So it has the big cross beam, like two big cross beams like this, and then some support things down like that, and then usually somewhere right in the middle there. And
What is segregated?
huh?
What is segregated?
No,
That's not the word either?
it's not it. No, it doesn't mean it was an isolationist.
Oh, okay, all
That
right.
was the word I was looking for. Isolationist.
See, if you wouldn't have said segregate, then he would never have thought
Yeah,
of it.
that's it.
See, that was good.
Isolationist. They're very, very isolationistic. Probably not the Japanese so much because they become so commercialized. But that's Eastern religion. So next week,
Only the Jews and Christians.
anybody have their syllabus with them?
Yeah.
A long syllabus?
You have it, I think.
Eastern religion is very
Which one?
nonsensical, huh?
Comparison.
It's a different way. It's a completely different way of looking at
Next week
existence
is
and logic and, you know, and
By the way,
life.
non-traditional-
It's
It's
very
out there.
nonsensical to us.
Right.
To
Non-traditional.
them, it makes perfect sense.
Apparently.
Religion.
But it doesn't, but in the eye, if you look at things from a logical perspective, a logical linear, you know, again, it's the both and the either or thing that,
Yeah.
I misspoke earlier,
okay?
but what I was alluding to was in Acts 16:6, it says, now when they had gone through Phrygia and the region of Galatia, they were forbidden by the Holy Spirit, not Jesus, to preach the word in Asia. After they had come to Mysia, they tried to go into Bithynia, but the Spirit did not permit them to go there either. So, like I said, for me, when I read that, and I've read this a couple of times, and I thought that whole thing is kind of the mystical.
Yeah.
Far
it's weird.
east.
I mean, although Thomas went as far as India. Thomas did go as far as India. By then, Hinduism was well underway. But yeah, it's a different, and it's just a different way of looking at existence. You know, it's more than just a different philosophy. Sometimes you almost don't have a common ground to even have a conversation with
Yeah,
them,
at least with the
because
Muslim, you can disagree about who was on, you know, who went with Abraham or whatever, but
Mhm.
it's nonsensical. It
It's
just-
different, because here's the thing, here's the problem is, you present your position and they go, okay, that's good too. You know, I don't have to, you know, Ravi Zacharias talks about this one time that he, and I may have shared this before, he was in Cambodia and he was preaching and he got to the end, he gave an invitation and all these people were coming forward, right? And then his interpreter started talking. And he wasn't saying anything, the interpreter was talking, and everybody started walking out. And he says, you know, Ravi Zacharias says, I don't know what he was saying, but I was really hoping he would shut up. He says, because everybody was coming forward, now they're walking out. And then he found out later that the interpreter got up and says, you have to understand, they came forward because they wanted to add Jesus to their faith system. I told them, if you come forward and put your faith in Jesus Christ, you have to abandon your faith in all other religions and come and worship Jesus only. And that's why they said, no, we wouldn't do that. You know, we want to keep everything. That's the problem, is they just, okay, Jesus, okay, we'll take Jesus too. And we'll just put him right over here next to all the other things. And that's why there's no,
It's like a religion buffet.
yeah, cover all your bases, you know, that kind of thing.
That's what Baha'i is.
Okay?
Non-traditional beliefs and cults next week.
Right. Do I have a list of which ones though?
Yeah.
Which ones am I doing?
Non-traditional beliefs and cults is Unitarians,
Yeah.
Christian Science, Unification Church, and Scientology.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we're gonna do Jehovah's
Don't wanna miss
Witnesses,
it.
Mormonism and all that in the last class. Yeah, more of the cults and stuff, although those ones are kind of culty too. But, yeah, the Christian Science right up our alley in New England, huh?
Pastor Bill?
Also,
Actually, it was,
who's the other guy?
actually, I think it was New Hampshire, it wasn't Maine. I think it was New Hampshire.
We have our old pastor
Mhm.
from Maine.
Travolta.
His family were Christian Scientists.
Are Cruz and Travolta?
That's what he was
from
brought up in.
Mary Baker, Glover, Patterson,
Yeah,
Eddie.
yeah.
Anyway, questions, comments?
Scientology.
All right, tell everybody to come next week.
Are Cruz and Travolta coming for the Scientology class?
What's that?
Tom Cruise and Travolta coming for the Scientology?
Is that the alien one?
I'd rather get Leah Remini, is that her name? She's got a TV show.
They lined up their shoes and they had
She's just, I mean,
Right,
she's just
Apple
every
Way.
week, she's just bam, wham, wham, wham. So, no, nobody for Scientology. But we did have, Marcy was
Right,
in
right.
Christian Science, but Keith said she was just a little girl and doesn't really remember anything of it. So, all right, let's pray. Father, thank you again for this class, and Father, let it again just be training for us to help us understand how to reach these people. Father, it's such a tragic thing that Satan has taken them so far beyond even under the understanding of the language that we use, and the logic and the mindset and the reasoning that we depend so heavily upon is just thrown to the wind when we look at some of these faith systems. And help us to learn how to bridge that gap, that we can communicate even just the concept of truth. Find a way to break through their traditional and cultural barriers that separate them from you. So Father, we pray for all these people. China, India, Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, these areas where these religions have prospered. And particularly for South Korea, Father, we pray because it is the Christian nation in the midst of all of that, that as you have been using, we continue to use South Korea as a launching point for missions. And that you would bless them, bless the churches in South Korea, and help them to be a light in that region of the world. Father, we again just thank you for this time you've given us, and ask that you just bless us as we go. In Jesus' name.